In April 1947, a cargo ship loaded with industrial chemicals was docked in the port of Texas City. The morning began like any other in a growing post-war industrial town. Workers moved along the waterfront, cargo was being handled, and smoke rising from the ship did not immediately signal danger. Within hours, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history would tear through the harbor, setting off fires, shockwaves, and a chain of destruction that few had imagined possible. What followed was not a single accident, but a sequence of events that revealed how quickly industrial routine can become catastrophe. In the years following World War II, Texas City had grown into a vital industrial port along the Gulf Coast. Refineries, chemical plants, and shipping terminals operated side by side, supporting the rapid expansion of American manufacturing and agriculture. On April 16, 1947, the French cargo ship SS Grand Camp was docked at Pier O, loaded with more than 2,000 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. The material was widely used in farming and considered safe when handled under proper conditions. It had been stored in paper sacks and tightly packed into the ship's hold, awaiting transport overseas. Activity at the port followed a familiar rhythm. Workers moved cargo between warehouses and vessels, trains delivered industrial goods, and nearby facilities continued normal operations. The presence of hazardous materials was not unusual in such an environment, and safety practices reflected the standards of the time rather than modern risk awareness. Few people at the docks fully understood how unstable ammonium nitrate could become under heat and confinement. The ship itself showed no outward signs of danger as the morning began. From a distance, it appeared to be just another routine shipment in a busy harbor. The combination of industrial growth, accepted handling methods, and confidence in established procedures created an atmosphere where potential risks remained largely theoretical. What seemed like ordinary port activity was, in reality, the beginning of a chain of events that would soon test the limits of safety and preparedness. Shortly after loading operations had begun that morning, crew members aboard the SS Grand Camp noticed smoke rising from the cargo hold. At first, the situation did not appear critical. Fires in ship holds were not unheard of, and standard response procedures focused on containing flames while protecting the cargo from water damage. Rather than flooding the hold, which could ruin the fertilizer shipment, attempts were made to smother the fire by sealing hatches and introducing steam. This approach was consistent with prevailing maritime practices, but it also trapped heat inside a confined space filled with a highly reactive material. As minutes passed, pressure and temperature within the hold began to rise. Smoke continued to escape through seams and vents, drawing the attention of dock workers and onlookers who gathered nearby. Firefighters were called to the scene, positioning equipment along the pier and preparing to manage what was believed to be a controllable fire. Few present understood that ammonium nitrate, when exposed to intense heat under confinement, could undergo rapid chemical decomposition leading to detonation. The visible signs remained limited to smoke and growing heat, conditions that suggested urgency but not imminent catastrophe. Meanwhile, normal activity in surrounding refineries and warehouses continued. Trains moved along nearby tracks, ships remained docked, and workers stayed at their posts. The fire aboard the Grand Camp was treated as a localized incident, one that could be resolved with time and standard procedure. Beneath that assumption, however, the combination of confined space, rising temperature, and unstable cargo was steadily transforming the situation into something far more dangerous than anyone at the harbor realized. As the fire inside the Grand Camp intensified, the atmosphere along the pier began to change. Thick smoke poured from the sealed cargo hold, rising high enough to be seen across parts of the town. The heat inside the ship continued to build, while pressure from chemical reactions increased beyond what the vessel's structure had been designed to contain. Firefighters remained close to the hatch, attempting to manage the situation with hoses and equipment positioned along the dock. Curious residents and workers gathered at a distance, watching what appeared to be a serious but still controlled incident. The cargo itself gave little visible warning of the scale of danger developing within. Ammonium nitrate did not behave like conventional explosives. It did not require a fuse or deliberate ignition. Instead, under the right conditions of heat and confinement, it could undergo a rapid transformation from burning material to violent detonation. As the temperature climbed, the steel walls of the hold trapped energy that could no longer dissipate safely. Moments before the explosion, witnesses described a sudden change in sound and movement, as if the ship itself had begun to vibrate under internal force. At approximately 9:12 a.m., the Grand Camp detonated with immense power. The blast shattered buildings, ignited fires across the harbor, and generated a shockwave felt miles away. A column of smoke and debris rose high into the sky, marking the beginning of a disaster that would unfold in stages rather than ending with the first explosion. The initial explosion of the Grand Camp devastated the immediate harbor area within seconds. Nearby warehouses were flattened, rail cars were overturned, and fires ignited across storage facilities and refineries along the waterfront. Ships moored at adjacent piers were torn from their positions or severely damaged by flying debris. Windows shattered throughout Texas City, and buildings miles away felt the force of the shockwave. The blast generated intense heat and scattered burning fragments across a wide radius, creating multiple secondary fires that quickly spread through industrial installations. Emergency response became complicated by the scale of destruction. Communication lines were disrupted, roads were blocked by debris, and many first responders had already been near the pier when the explosion occurred. Despite the chaos, rescue efforts began almost immediately. Survivors searched through wreckage for trapped workers, while additional firefighters and medical teams were dispatched from neighboring towns. The port, which had operated as a coordinated industrial system only hours earlier, was now a fragmented landscape of smoke, twisted steel, and burning structures. Yet the disaster was not over. Unbeknownst to many at the scene, another ship in the harbor, the SS High Flyer, also carried ammonium nitrate cargo that had caught fire during the aftermath. As fires continued to burn and damaged facilities struggled to contain them, the risk of further explosions remained. The first blast had transformed the harbor, but it had also set the conditions for a second, equally dangerous phase of the catastrophe. In the hours after the first explosion, fires continued to burn across the harbor and surrounding industrial facilities. Storage tanks ruptured, pipelines ignited, and sections of the port remained inaccessible due to debris and intense heat. Rescue efforts were complicated by the scale of destruction and the ongoing risk of further blasts. Hospitals in Texas City and nearby communities quickly became overwhelmed with injured workers and residents suffering from burns, trauma, and shock. Emergency responders from across the region converged on the area, establishing temporary medical stations and coordinating evacuation routes. As the day progressed, attention shifted toward the damaged cargo ship High Flyer, which had also caught fire while still carrying ammonium nitrate. Despite attempts to tow the vessel away from the dock, the fire intensified. Late that night, the High Flyer detonated with a second massive explosion, sending additional shockwaves through the already devastated port. The blast reignited fires, destroyed remaining structures along the waterfront, and further hindered recovery operations. By morning, much of the industrial district had been reduced to twisted steel, shattered concrete, and smoldering debris. The disaster had unfolded in stages, each event compounding the last. What began as a single shipboard fire had evolved into a complex industrial catastrophe affecting thousands of lives and reshaping an entire community. In the weeks that followed, federal and state authorities launched a comprehensive investigation into the causes and consequences of the disaster. The scale of the explosions had exposed critical weaknesses in how hazardous materials were stored, transported, and regulated in industrial ports. Investigators focused on the behavior of ammonium nitrate under heat and confinement, reviewing shipping procedures, labeling practices, and emergency response decisions made aboard the Grand Camp. It became clear that while the chemical was widely used and considered manageable under normal conditions, its explosive potential had not been fully understood by many workers or officials responsible for handling it. The inquiry also examined coordination between port authorities, fire departments, and industrial operators. Communication gaps and limited awareness of chemical hazards had contributed to delays in recognizing the severity of the situation. Legal claims followed, with thousands of residents seeking compensation for loss of life, injuries, and widespread property damage. The case eventually reached federal courts, becoming one of the first large-scale tests of government liability under the newly established Federal Tort Claims Act. Beyond legal outcomes, the disaster prompted changes in safety standards, including improved labeling of dangerous cargo, stricter handling protocols, and expanded emergency planning in industrial communities. The investigation revealed that the catastrophe was not the result of a single failure, but of systemic assumptions about risk in an era of rapid industrial growth. These findings would influence how hazardous materials were managed in ports and cities across the United States. The Texas City disaster remains one of the deadliest industrial accidents in United States history. Its impact extended far beyond the destruction of a single harbor, reshaping how communities understood the risks of rapid industrial expansion. In the years that followed, safety regulations governing the storage and transport of hazardous chemicals became more clearly defined, and emergency response planning in industrial regions grew more coordinated and systematic. The explosions demonstrated how interconnected modern infrastructure had become, where a single incident could trigger widespread consequences across refineries, shipping operations, and residential neighborhoods. For survivors and families of the victims, recovery was measured not only in rebuilding structures, but in rebuilding trust in the systems meant to protect them. Texas City was gradually reconstructed, its port returning to operation as part of the nation's post-war economic growth. Yet the memory of the disaster remained embedded in local and national awareness. It became a reference point in discussions of industrial responsibility, risk communication, and the importance of preparedness. The events of April 1947 revealed that technological progress often advances faster than safety understanding, and that lessons learned through catastrophe can shape standards for generations.